Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I have Jay from Slurpgang, Peaceful Slave on Twitter, as a guest. And I really enjoyed this podcast. I went back and listened to it, which I don't go back and re-listen to a lot of my podcasts. Usually I have a pretty good idea of how to introduce it. I had so much fun recording this episode, and I had to go back and re-listen, so I knew how to introduce y'all to this episode. We discuss age of consent, deviancy, and just having a connection to your culture and what that connection means to you, and how you create these connections. So I'm sure you'll enjoy this. Like I said, I had a really good time. This is one of my favorite episodes to record. Had a really good time, laughed my ass off, and made stupid jokes throughout the podcast, and yet we still talked about things that actually mattered. So, Jay from Slurpgang. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great anarcho-capitalist and libertarian. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So, go to RyanBunting.com for all of your podcast needs. Check out his book. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. If you enjoy the content that I am creating, and you not only want more of this, but you want to hear some of the crazy shit Beatrix and I are doing on the side, don't forget to become a Patreon at patreon.com/TD Salmons. And you will get access to shows no one else hears, and all the shows everyone hears without the ads or the intros. I might even post some music. So, I hope to see you there. Enjoy the show.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
Okay, I am here with the rabbi, Mr. J from Slurpgang.
Hello.
What is happening, my man?
Well, growing up, my mother wanted me to be a doctor, and now look at me.
Well, everybody wants to talk to you now.
Barely. It's more like they're required to.
Oh, Jesus.
Man.
She wanted you to be a doctor.
Yeah. Either a doctor or a lawyer. I said, fuck that to both of them.
So you're going to school, though. What are you going to school for?
So it's still really Jewish. I'm an economics major. Wrapping up my my last year. I got about one more semester to go. And once I'm free of that, I'm a contractor.
Contractor?
Yep.
You're doing construction? Like what are you contracting?
Yep. Yeah. So we do construction. Pretty much a hardscape, anything. So driveways, patios, pool decks, outdoor kitchens, that sort of bull. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life because
that's pretty cool.
I want to work for a corporation.
That's pretty cool. Is that a family? That's a family business?
Yes. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So in a couple of years, it will be all mine, and I get to run into the ground.
Nice. You can be like, no.
Yeah.
Mises said, do it this way.
I'm not that autistic. It's like I have these economics books that I bought at the beginning of last year when I still cared. That I just haven't gone through reading because I just do not have the patience for that anymore. So before Slurpgang, I did pretty much like a boilerplate and cap show, and that devolved so rapidly because we stopped caring. COVID made us stop caring. All the topics were getting really boring, and pretty much the only time I was enjoying recording it was when I was drunk off my ass and we were doing bonus episodes.
Yeah.
The rest of it has just been, and now that show is technically still around. It's been rebranded, and we've posted one episode in the last month, and we had to scrap the last one we recorded because it was terrible. Which was the second time. That was the first time. It happened to me twice that we had to scrap an episode. The other one was with Slurpgang last week. Thanks, Cotton. Dumbass. Really. Cotton has been beefing with some Mises Institute scholars. I know the Libertarian Institute and Mises Institute are like fellow travelers. So I think really there should just be a burn notice on Cotton and really just exclude him from the market.
Man, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I look at the Mises Institute as kind of a fellow traveler. We're kind of like a junior varsity version of it, I guess, at the Libertarian Institute because we're still young there. There's still a lot to do. And I don't know. I look at what's happening with the dynamics, the infighting in the libertarian circles, and I just kind of shrug and laugh. I'm just like, all right, whatever, man. I don't even get it. I'm just not even interested.
I don't care to participate in that, but I live for that chaos. Like when I see the timeline getting stupid over nothing. And I've had some hand in some events that may have happened recently with a big name libertarian adjacent figure. And, he may now be getting called out on Joe Rogan without being named for some weird shit.
All right. You're going to have to fill me in because I think I missed this.
So this was about maybe 3-4 weeks ago. So to name him, because I don't care, I'm not Joe Rogan, Thaddeus Russell, who has, he's done the circle a lot. He's very libertarian adjacent. Yeah. He has this very weird obsession with defending sex with underage people.
Oh, okay. I know where you're going with this. All right.
Yeah. To the point where he puts out this weird, this lecture for Renegade University. He's advertising it. And it's like, are you normal? Do you want to be normal? Are your desires normal? Blah, 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 blah. So I was just like, damn, Thad, have you been hanging around a local middle school again? They really ought to let you speed through the school zone when you pass by. I know I wouldn't want you driving near my kids or something
Jesus.
like that. And he decides to engage with me. He has like 30 times the followers. He decides to engage with me, and he keeps engaging. I just keep making fun of him because I live for chaos. And my buddy Lee, proprietor of N Block Press, jumps in and starts making fun of him too and baiting him. And it gets to a point where he subtweets us. So Lee quote tweets him and basically gets that to say that there's nothing wrong with a 40-year-old having sex with a 13-year-old if a 13-year-old doesn't regret it. And it went downhill from there.
I saw that tweet. Yeah. And I didn't understand where it originated. I didn't know what was going on with it and how it started. And just full disclosure, I consider Thad a friend of mine. I've had him on. We text sometimes, and like I'll be at his RU event in October in Lockhart at Buck's house. But he's done a couple of episodes with different people that have done research on the registering as a sex offender. And I thought they were interesting because there is something to be said about people that are being registered as a sex offender when it's not at all necessary. Now, the way I look at these laws, to be completely honest, is I look at these laws as a way for parents to cop out of raising their children and teaching their children about sex.
Yes.
But at the same time, I thought it was a very poor choice to engage in this conversation on Twitter.
And that's the thing at the end of the day. It's like, so for the record, I am not a Thad fan too much. Just I never liked him that much. I don't like the way he speaks. The way I described it, if I may roast him a little bit in a group chat I'm in, is like a typical Californian. He sounds like he walks around with a mason jar full of his kombucha farts for him to huff throughout the day. And I just can't get past that. So I never really had a thing, but when he started with like the underage sex thing, that one was weird to me. And so it's like, I completely get the sex offender registry thing, because you end up on there for some really stupid shit. Like,
right.
Or you were drunk, you pissed in a park at 3 a.m. when no one was there and you're a sex offender. That's bullshit. Or an 18-year-old has photos of himself naked from when he was 17. He gets caught with it. And it's like, there's a lot of room to have conversations here, and like justifiable conversations that can resonate with people. And age of consent also, it's like, yeah, what about a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old? Like these are conversations I won't say willing to have, because I don't prefer to have. But at the end of the day, and like you said, yeah, it is a way for parents to cop out, because really what should be happening is this should be sort of a community standard thing. There should be parents having an active role in their children's lives. I think that's the end all be all solution to that, is that this is something that is very regional, because he starts pulling up examples like the age of consent in the Philippines is like 13.
Yeah. It's
like, but we're not talking about the Philippines. We're not talking about, countries where the standard of living is much lower and the life expectancy is much lower, because in cultures where the life expectancy is lower, people marry younger, have children younger. That's just the way of life. And as societies get, richer, the life expectancy goes up, you sort of start pushing that age up.
Why do you think that is?
Children for a couple more years.
What do you think that is? Like,
I think it's the luxury. It's the luxury to extend your childhood.
Okay.
Because the holdover from my economics days, I still have a lot of the arguments in my head.
Yeah.
It's like unions didn't end child labor. The market did.
Right.
Because suddenly there was not a market for children to be working anymore. So the children have the luxury to be children for longer. But when you live in a society where the average life expectancy is, in the 40s or the 50s, even though you'll have examples, of course, because this is how averages work, you have examples where people live the normal average age of a human, like 70 something, 80 years, still you have more of a pressure to have a family younger, because you need to carry on that lineage younger and you have more children. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of room for these conversations, of course. But when you make a comment like a teacher has sex with his 13-year-old student and she doesn't regret it, was that a rape? Well, we're in really weird territory here.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that, like in Texas, for example, if the parents consent, the child can still be married at the age of 13 to whoever. Like all the parents just have to sign off on it, you know? So the person that this child is marrying could be 50 years old. And then you think about like people like Milo Yiannopoulos, right? And all the shit he got into for saying he was the one who had seduced the priest when he was 14 years old.
Yeah.
And I still laugh at that because it was a funny line.
Yeah, and I think like that one was so overblown because Milo is a troll. So like that was, and you know, think what you will about Milo. The guy says outrageous shit. That's his entire living. So like really, I think that was his way of coping with like a traumatic experience, to joke about that on air, because that's the way a lot of people handle like trauma, with humor.
Well, yeah,
you know.
I mean, there is that, but there is like this culture in the gay community of young boys and men sleeping together. And I think that's kind of what he was trying to break the ice on, honestly. I think he was trying to find a humorous way to say this, that it's hey, like this is normal. Like we do this in the gay community, this happens. And so I'm wondering, like, it always struck me funny. There was a situation a few years ago where a 14-year-old boy had slept with his 36-year-old teacher, right? And I had made a comment on Facebook. I was like, well, when I was 14 years old, this guy would be a hero. You know, like,
yeah.
And so it's really there is this odd engagement that we have as a culture with this sexual phenomenon. If it is a 14-year-old gay boy having sex with a priest and there's no complaints, we kind of like, okay, we just kind of shrug our shoulders and look the other way. If it's a 14-year-old boy having sex with a 30-year-old teacher, we give him a high five and probably buy him a Slurpee or something, you know, even a six-pack at that point. But if it's a 14-year-old girl and a 30-year-old man, then we look at it differently, you know? Yeah. And so there is a conversation to be had here as to why there's this dynamic. Like, women aren't helpless. You know what I'm saying? They do have agency in action, and they actually mature faster in the brain than men do. So it's odd that there is this odd kind of dynamic that's happening.
Yeah, no, that definitely is there. And like I personally, I was never molested, thankfully, but the high school I did go to did have a problem with sex pests. So in my senior year, 2 college advisors, which one replaced the other, both of them were fired for creeping on middle schoolers. Really? And then about 2 years after I graduated, a news story broke that my English teacher, who had become the vice principal in that time, had a 2-year affair starting with a 15-year-old boy. And she got arrested for it. And I, like you said, it is true. Girls do mature faster than boys. I mean, this is something that if you're around, there's a weird sentence in this context. If you're around children, very weird way to say it, but if you're around children,
none of y'all are going to be able to see this, but Jay is sweating like a pedo at a playground right now.
What can I say? Weinstein, Epstein, what's the connection? But it's, I've like when I was 15, I worked at a summer camp, and the girls were more tolerable than the boys. Because I worked with like God, it was terrible. I got stuck with like the kindergartners to like the first graders, and I was a counselor in training, so all the counselors shirked their responsibilities and put it on me. I wanted to blow my brains out, number one, but number two, the girls were far easier to deal with than the boys. And the only boy who was easy to deal with was raised by 3 mothers. I don't know how that worked in a Jewish summer camp, but apparently that kid, 3 mothers. And the boys were very, very fucking annoying. I mean, there was one event where after we had taken them to the pool, the other male counselor shirked the responsibility of me of making sure they behave in a locker room. They were all huddled between their towels in a circle and laughing at each other's penises. And I was very, very annoyed at this occurrence because they wouldn't fucking stop. The girls, they mature faster than the boys. But so that's why I like, in the case of like a teacher that, like a female teacher sleeps with a teenage boy, I am still hard on that situation because I know that, you know, when I was 14 also, you know, if a guy slept with one of the teachers, it would be like, hey, nice, dude.
Right.
But then in retrospect, you know, as I get older, I look back on it and it's like, in reality, he may not be traumatized or in a way that he would realize, but it's like, this is an adult who used their station as an adult, as an authority. They abused that and slept with someone who was nowhere even close to fully mentally developed.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, this is one greater thing of like power dynamics, because then you bring up the example of like a CEO who sleeps with a secretary. Was that predatory because he had power over her and she was the less powerful one in that situation? But I think that's different when you're dealing with two fully developed adults, because, you know, in that case, that's a woman who realizes her sexual power in a marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And she uses that to get what she wants out of this. So in reality, he's not preying on someone who is weak and powerless. He's engaging in a transaction where she's getting what she wants, he's getting what he wants. And that's different when you're including people who are, you know, in a very hormonal period in their life. Their brains still have like a decade more to develop. And so it's you know, you're in much muddier waters. And
right.
You take that and you put it into a 40-year-old professor slept with a 13-year-old girl. That's fucked. That's just flat out fucked.
I just can't see a situation where if I were a 14-year-old boy or a 13-year-old boy and I would have fucked a hot teacher, I would ever feel like the victim in that situation. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm wondering if there's kind of the same dynamic with women, you know, and men being protectors. We're not necessarily seeing that, you know, that we're not seeing women as predatory as often as we see men as predatory, you know? And so I'm wondering if that's kind of part of the dynamic of the culture in the United States.
I think so. And, you know, this is really a multi-layered thing because, yeah, it's very easy to overlook that women can have a predatory nature too. But I mean, all you have to do is look at the lesbian community and look at how they have a higher domestic abuse rate than any other sexual group. And it's like, yeah, women can be just as predatory as men. Like, it's not a gender thing, but it's very easy to get lost in that because, yeah, we have these cultural holdovers, you know, whether you think it's good or bad, the feminist revolution, blah, 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 you know, eroding the gender roles is like, we still have these holdovers naturally of men are the providers, the protectors. And when they act in a way that is untowards of a provider and a protector, we look upon that badly versus a woman who is in a very different station. So yeah, it's weird. And it's a topic that I don't broach on much because I just don't see a point to, because, like, you know, I turned 23 this year. I wouldn't sleep with a college freshman because they seem like children to me. And then I'm sure, you know, in a couple of years, I'm going to look at people in their early 20s. I'm going to think the same way. It's like, yeah, you know, 10 years down the line, I'm not going to think I was mature at 22, 23.
Yeah.
So I'm very much a person that likes to date within my age range. And I sort of apply that standard to other people as well.
And so, and that ranges from 13 to 33.
Yeah, you know, give or take. Tinder doesn't really allow you to go under 18, but
No, I feel what you're saying. I get you, because you're looking for somebody on your own level and somebody that you can, you know, actually enjoy your time with. I'm just wondering if it's boiled down to the animal nature of the event, you know what I'm saying, and just the sexuality. Is there a potential for a 13-year-old girl who is also coming into her own sexuality to be sexually attracted to a 30-year-old teacher and to pursue that as much as a 14-year-old boy might, and so in that situation, is that something that we hold that 30-year-old accountable for because they have more agency and they have more life experience and they're a lot more mature and they know they should say no? Or do we mark it up to one of those lust-filled events that enters your life and you fuck the fat chick because she's as much fun as riding a moped?
The story of losing my virginity. And she smelled like a fish market too, man. I had to wash my penis 3 times. Terrible.
I'm puking because I'm in love with you.
I wonder how my kid in Ecuador is doing.
This is how I deal with emotion. But
yeah, no, to answer that seriously, like, I think, like, yeah, we have to look at it through both angles because yes, and we know this, women are attracted to men that are older than them. Number one, that is a very well-known thing.
Well, they're looking for power and status, right?
Exactly. So when you're a young girl, you're 13, you're 14, you're starting to explore your sexuality, and you see, a young, attractive teacher. We're not talking about Mr. Johnson, who is in his early 60s, fat, balding, and likes to.
He definitely took advantage of you. We're not doubting that.
You didn't sleep with him because you were attracted to him. You slept with him because he raped you. But let's take, Mr. Henderson, who is in his early 30s. He works out a little bit, so he looks pretty good. He's charming.
He looks like Top Lobster.
And he Top
Hey,
Lobster,
if I was a 13-year-old girl, I'd fuck the hell out of Top Lobster.
Let's get down to the soundbite. But yeah, so you look at him and he's attractive, he's charming, he's funny, he runs a good class, and you feel a little tingling in these parts that you don't really get looking at the kids in your class.
Right.
The guys who are spraying Axe body spray on themselves and still laughing at fart jokes. So
I still laugh at fart jokes.
We all do, in honesty, except when Cotton pulls out on the soundboard. Again, hashtag blacklist Cotton.
Now I want to hear this episode, dude.
I have all the files. Like, I can put it together for the people that want to hear it and send it over. But it went so badly.
I will publish it as a year 0 podcast.
Yeah, so you look at that girl and she's like, obviously she's attracted to this guy. And she feels things because he has status over her, even though he's a public school teacher, so he doesn't actually have status in real life.
Right.
And he's still probably driving a Saab from the 90s.
A Saab is a modern version of the Pinto when I was growing up.
Pinto, the Gremlin, anything AMC.
That's awesome.
Actually, I did have a teacher in high school who drove like a 90s Saab 2000, and it was a shit box. But yeah, so she looks at him, and in her little middle schooler mind, she thinks like, wow, this is what a man should be. And she's attracted to him and she wants to sleep with him. And I've seen this plenty of times. And it's like, so I understand that, yes, it is perfectly natural for this girl to have an attraction to him because she poses something that tingles the mind of a young girl.
Right.
I think he is in a position where he has to exercise control. Number one, if he's attracted to a 13-year-old girl, he should not be working in a public school.
Yeah.
That should be something that just should be flat out no.
Yeah.
Two, if he's in a scenario where he can act upon it, I think he has to resist that temptation. Because, I mean, and in a greater context, I mean, this is what sin is. Sin is something that is appealing. It is the apple on the tree, the snake tempting.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to resist sin and temptation. So, and I'm not a Christian personally, but I saw someone put it well once that, an example of homosexuality. oh, I'm born this way. Well, that's why you're born again in Christ and you resist the temptation of sin. So when you're in this position, you're supposed to exercise. You're an adult. This is the marking of an adult. You're mature. You can resist a temptation that you shouldn't give into. Because even if this girl isn't traumatized, if you repeat it, this girl might not be traumatized, but you have set a standard for yourself where if you do this again, the next one might.
Right.
And you're putting
That's a
yourself
good
in a
point. That's a very good point.
You're putting yourself in a position where you're opening yourself up to this world you should not be delving into. You're ruining yourself, and you run the risk where every one of them is a gamble. Because if this girl's attracted to you, there might be another one that is, most definitely is another one that is, but she is not at the station maybe that she can participate in this.
Right.
She might be dealing with the temptations, the desires, but then when it happens, she's not in a position where she can do that. I mean, the last girl I dated was 22 and in a position like that, where after anything slightly sexual, she had so much guilt built into her that she would have like a nervous breakdown. So it differs person to person, but we can differentiate that with adults versus with children. Can't really tell who's who's where. We have to set this barrier, the standard for ourselves, where as a society, we say that even if in this special case, this girl is at a level of mental maturity, or this boy is at a level of mental maturity, we have to exercise restraint and not engage in that. And again, if you are in a position where this is a struggle for you, you should consider a career change and go work completely around adults.
So here's where this kind of like placates or plays into what led us into this, and Thad Russell, right?
Yeah.
So Thad's ex-wife, when she was 15 years old, she had an affair with one of her teachers. When she divorced Thad, she married that teacher. So she is married to one of her old high school teachers that she had an affair with when she was 15 years old.
Oh.
So I think this kind of feeds into, thank you, baby. I think this kind of feeds into his questioning of this, right? Because it's a personal experience, something that he's experienced in his life.
Yeah. And, I didn't know that she divorced him and married the teacher. I knew because he brought it up that, he was married to someone who had that experience where the teacher slept with her and she didn't regret it and it didn't affect her.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a perfectly believable situation where someone was in that scenario and they were not mentally scarred by this.
Right.
But
well, like you said, the next person, I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the points I've made is like you're creating these habits like by your actions, right? And so what are these habits that you're creating? And so if your habit becomes that you were sleeping with a student, when do you run into that situation that student that you are pursuing and feels compelled to sleep with you does regret it? And then who's responsible for that? The 30-year-old or the 13-year-old? Well, obviously the 30-year-old.
Yeah. And, it's a very standard libertarian anarchist talking point that things are subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact of reality. Nobody needs to, anybody that listens to something from the Libertarian Institute doesn't need to be told that, some person might value gold, some person might value dirt.
Right.
That's subjective. And we have subjective experiences. But at the same time, just because things are subjective doesn't mean we don't set up rules as a society, that we don't set up walls that shouldn't be crossed, even if there are people who can handle it on the other side. Because take sleeping with animals, for example. There's very few people in their right mind that will tell you that you should fuck a horse.
Right.
And technically the horse doesn't feel, some animals, it's been proven, do feel psychological damage from being slept with. And
a dolphin will take it.
Dolphin will take it. Dolphin will give it. Like that episode of King of the Hill.
Oh, did you hear? There was a story I remember reading whenever I was when I was in my 20s, and it was this woman who was suing SeaWorld because a dolphin raped her.
I fucking hate dolphins, man. I was like, that's a quick side note. I hate them. I hate everything about them. They are fucked up. They're smart, and they are creepy to touch.
Well, and they are the only other mammal other than humans that have sex for pleasure.
They're weird, and dude, they like pass around pufferfish to get high. Like they sniff them and stick them
Jesus!
around,
I've never wanted to be a
balls.
dolphin so much in my life.
Man, have you ever touched one? Like they don't feel real. They feel like animatronics. It's fucking creepy. I don't like dolphins. I don't like giraffes. I fucking hate those animals. But
Giraffes are crazy out in the wild, man. When I went to South Africa, we went to a wildlife reserve, and watching these things cross the street, and you just have to stop because you're like, what can I do to this? Like,
how is this a real animal? Like, have you seen how they eat bark off trees?
Yeah.
With that nasty tongue, they just get up alongside and like,
you know what's super impressive though is when you're in a line of cars and an elephant walks up to the car in front of you and just starts smacking it with its trunk, just starts beating the shit out of this car. You're like, what are you gonna do? There's nothing you can do. We were trying to leave, and a wildebeest jumped out in front of the car and just looked at us like, "What, bitch?"
Yeah, dude, not far from me is like an animal safari thing where they set up a whole preserve and you get to drive through it. And they tell you to keep your windows open because some of the animals will just, like the lions, will just walk right the fuck up to your car and they do not care.
They don't give a fuck. Care. No, they're stories from the reserve that Beatrix brought me to, which is in Mpumalanga. It was Kruger National Park, and there are stories where people would see like a group of lions on one side of their car. So like they would sit up on their window and take pictures over the car, and the female lion would come sneaking around behind them and grab them and yank them out and fucking kill them.
Yeah, no, don't fuck with lions. That's a really easy thing to learn.
Yeah.
Especially, like, the dudes don't do shit. It's the females that are fucking killers.
Keep your ass in the fucking car, dude.
Yeah, like here's the to tie it back. Don't fuck a lion either. Don't try to fuck a lion because you will get killed.
Yeah.
But also don't fuck horses. Like, have you ever seen this? There's this documentary about horse fuckers in rural America, and one of them is talking like it's a couple, and they live on a farm, and both of them fuck their animals. And the guy has this motto: just the right height, no bucket required. For when a pony is the right height to fuck. And so it's like, I don't know if these ponies are getting traumatized by the owner fucking them while standing on a bucket. I don't know. I don't care to know. Because we're in a position where it's like we can all collectively as a society voluntarily agree that fucking a horse is weird and you shouldn't do it. Should you be locked up in jail? Probably not. But should we rightfully deride you and shun you from society?
Ostracize the fuck out of you? Yeah.
Yeah. But then the problem is they get ostracized. Well, the guy's a farmer, so really what are you doing to him? He's gonna keep living on his farm and fucking his horses.
There was a story whenever I joined the military about a guy who was stationed in Germany, and he was coming home drunk from the bar. And he fucking stumbled onto this farm, and this fucking farmer had all these prized chickens, and he took one of those fucking chickens and he fucked the shit out of it. Killed the chicken by fucking it.
How?
Well, the fucking army was on the fucking line for it. So, they ended up like they were getting sued by this farmer and shit. And so that's the only reason they found out that this even happened is because the farmer's like, hey, some dude fucked one of my prize chickens to death.
I just don't get the logistics of that.
Well, I mean, I did go to school in Katy, Texas. And one of the rules in the school handbook was no sexual intercourse with fowl on school property. Nick, I love specific rules. You know somebody had to do that before they put it in the rule book.
Yeah, like it's these things that happen at one point that make like in Florida, they specify porcupines for not being able to fuck. And like I've heard the arguments from the horse fuckers, like a horse vagina is very similar to a human vagina.
Okay, I've never met a horse fucker. So. I've seen a donkey show in Boys Town down at the Mexico border.
Those burro shows, man, fucking hell. Porcupine? Like, okay, you're gonna, you tell me like, okay, the animal has similar genitalia to a human, but a porcupine?
This is the most.
Somebody looked at it?
This is the most libertarian podcast that has ever been recorded. We're talking about animal fucking. And most of these incels will never get a whiff of a pussy if it's not an animal.
Hey, Thad, bring me on unregistered. I'll talk about zoophilia with you. But yeah, so my point is, like, we can set up these barriers. Like, we can collectively agree that this is wrong. Because there is morality outside of subjectivity. We also say that incest is wrong. And it's not even just because of the possibility of inbreeding, because that's like a 6% increase in, like a 6% increase in the chance of having an inbred child with incest. But we have these moral walls that we put up, and rightfully so. And, sure, it is completely possible that two adults are consenting and they're siblings and they live in an incestuous relationship and they'll never have an inbred child. It's completely possible. But we still come together as a society and say, hey, this is really a line that should not be crossed. And we don't want to associate with you for crossing this.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like, I think just because there is a subjective experience that can exist doesn't mean that we should tear down the wall that has been built over thousands of years of human civilization to allow it to happen en masse.
Right. Yeah, no. And one of the things I was thinking about earlier is I'm actually distantly related to Jerry Lee Lewis, who famously married his 13-year-old third cousin, and I look at how that affected his career, because the dude was just a bad motherfucker on the piano. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you look at how just one generation, it was fine to do that. And then by the time he became famous, everybody decided that was like out of line and it was shunned. And, and so, and that just happened in one generation. That wasn't even something that was a long standing, thing. And I think still in Louisiana, Mississippi, where a lot of my family's from, it is still legal to marry your third cousin. Yeah. I mean, it's
and at that point, like,
I think because everybody there is third cousins.
I wonder how that happened.
Those family trees go straight up. It's just a limb.
Dude, Johnny Knoxville did a DNA test and found out a lot of his DNA is related.
Oh, but that wasn't rare back in the day. Like that's a fairly recent phenomenon.
Yeah, and second, third cousin, like it's been proven that at that level of relation, there's the same level of inbreeding as any other couple. So, like, yeah, it's second, third cousin. That's, I think, we'd all give a funny look, but we, just shrug our shoulders and move along like, okay, whatever. They probably didn't even know each other growing up.
Right.
But like in France, it was legal for almost 200 years to have incest. Like it was under Napoleon, it got legalized, and it only got outlawed in 2012.
Really?
So it's like, just, let's not go around tearing down every wall we can just because we can.
So when you're looking at like the way that culture is advancing nowadays, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the culture around sexuality, and there's so much in the culture today about sexuality. I mean, with transgender rights, homosexuality, any number of ways. What are you looking at? Because like one of the things I really find interesting with talking to you and Cotton and Ace is I'm getting a perspective from a younger generation than I am. I'm in my 40s. I'm 42 years old. Mm-hmm. So it's like whenever I'm talking to y'all, I'm getting a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So how are you registering, digesting everything that's happening now with the culture?
Yeah. So, I also think I'm personally in a different position than Cotton and Ace because
you're a Jew.
Grew up.
I'm sitting here waiting on the Jew cam where you just zoom into your nose again, dude. That was like the best thing. That was so fucking funny. I was dying. You got a booger.
My nose
there.
wasn't Jewish until I broke it 3 times.
Hey, yeah. It looks like it's been broken.
Oh yeah, no, I got this nasty. So when I was 5,
you're starting to look like Rocky.
Yeah, when I was 5, I was swinging on 2 chairs for no good reason. One of them slipped, and I just fell face first on a hardwood floor.
Hey.
And then the other 2 times after that, so I did martial arts as a kid. I was sparring, and I got punched in the nose both times.
Yeah.
So the first time I ran right to the bathroom to let it bleed out. The second time I waited till the buzzer rang. So I was just like grappling, bleeding like crazy. 1 second. Okay, never mind. Yeah. Anyway.
You're fine.
But I'm in a different position because they grew up a little more rural than me. Like Cotton grew up in a small Louisiana town.
Yeah.
Ace grew up sort of metropolitan. Like I believe he was born in the Chicago area, but then he's like moved around a lot. I've consistently been in Miami my entire life.
Oh, okay.
So like this is a particularly libertine city. I mean, the most cocaine in the country comes through the Miami River.
Right.
I've seen the Coast Guards myself searching boats that come in because the drug runners find every way they can to smuggle in that coke, and they'll bust 16 tons, but hundreds of more are coming in that week.
Yeah.
And I went to an arts high school, so I saw like people that treat sexuality and gender like, clothing choices. I met a girl that claimed to be agender, then converted to Islam and wore a hijab every day to school.
No shit.
So I've met some freaks, but then I also grew up.
She didn't try to bomb your house, did she?
Given the chance, she really didn't like me, so I was waiting on. Because like I was, I went for writing, so right. I wasn't like some weird art kid. I just went there for writing, and I was one of the only right-wing people in that school, so I was not well liked. Because I grew up in like a very religious community. I went to a Hebrew school for 10 years of my life. So I was doing Torah classes every day. Half my day was like dedicated to the Jewish studies. And so I grew up religious, fell out with religion for a couple of years, but I stayed like, pretty conservative, right wing. So I have a little bit of a different experience.
Oh my gosh, she's beautiful.
Oh, she is a gorgeous dog, but she almost took my finger off a couple months ago. She's
gorgeous, man.
She is a beautiful fucking dog. But yeah, and I've participated in like some of the libertine stuff. I've been to the college parties. I've my very fair share of drinking. Participated in the non-monogamous sex. And really like having been on both sides of that, I err more on the religious conservative side of these sort of things, especially the more I grow older and grow into it and look back. I don't personally look back on those experiences I've had and say I never should have done those or that I regret them. But I do look on it and say, like, this is not a life. The day I have children, this is not the sort of life that I want them leading.
So you didn't find benefit from that?
No, like it was something that.
Do you think that is? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
No,
finish
go
what
ahead.
you're saying. I was just going to say, do you think that is because of your Hebrew school background, like the way that you were educated?
I think it's very possible. I think it's very possible that, that is my influence on it. But at the same time, I think it's something that, as just the species that we are. They're animals that, like cats, cat procreation is pretty much rape. Like, if you ever heard cats fucking, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And the males evolved to have like barbed penises so the women can't get away from them while they're doing it. So it's like humans are in a very different boat. So like from the religious perspective, of course, we have like, premarital sex is not necessarily bad. I know for Christians it's different than the Jews.
Right.
There was a rabbi in like the 14th century, pretty prominent, Maimonides, that said that it's largely a cultural thing. So if you're in a culture where premarital sex is acceptable, that you can participate, but you should still err on not doing it. But largely the culture is of, meaningful relationship centered sex, and that we are a species that also evolutionarily, we have a long gestation period. It takes 9 months for a child to even be born. Back 5,000, 6,000 years ago, it was very easy for a woman to die in childbirth. 200 years ago was easy. 100 years ago was easy for a woman to die in childbirth. And then the amount of time it takes for a human to develop. I mean, even if we're in a culture, like we were saying earlier, where you're forced to grow up quicker, still you're looking at over a decade of having to be in the child's life. So we were never a species where, you had one male, they got all the females, and he had all the children he wanted. And sex is just this meaningless thing because we have to advance our species. No, we're a species that's hardwired to be in these either, in some cases you've seen societies where it's polyamorous, but still it's centered around marriage, the man providing. And that was only something that you did if you were in the societal station to do.
Well, even the Jewish tradition, even in its history, was polyamorous, but it was one man with multiple wives, right? Yeah. And there was, I don't know, like you were talking about the Torah a while ago. So one of the lessons of the Torah, when they're talking about like all the men like sleeping with all the women, Abraham, obviously having an affair with his wife's handmaid, yada, yada, yada. There was this idea that it was better to shoot your seed into a whore than onto the ground. So it's almost, is it perceived in the Jewish faith that masturbation is worse than having an affair?
So that's a very interesting question, because there is a lot of rabbinic writings on masturbation, because the view in the past was sort of backwards, that a man had to save his seed because it is precious.
Right.
And obviously now we know that, well, you could be Clint Eastwood having children in his 70s.
Right.
But a woman has an expiration date on that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure they knew that back then too, that, women can't have children their whole lives. But I think that plays into it as well, that, this is something that is really special. Its primary purpose is to create life. The added benefit is that we get pleasure from it. But you do have conversations about concubines, like the opinion on that goes back and forth. So there were periods in Judaism where concubines were strictly forbidden. There are periods where they were allowed, but societally looked down upon. Mm-hmm. One of the things that gets missed in the context of like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob is that these were wealthy men. You know, it's not really talked about too much, but you can see the context of it in the Bible. And people sort of forget about that because we think about Abraham as a dude who lived in a tent and just sort of roamed around Canaan.
Right. Yeah.
But he was very wealthy. He had servants, he had slaves, he had several tents, he had livestock. So,
well, and then his entire family followed him around, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they were all very wealthy people. And we also see this with like Solomon, who had 1,000 wives. And so it's like, in reality, this polyamorous thing, and you see this now also in Islam, it's that 4 wives are allowed, but only if you have the means to provide for all 4.
Huh.
So the standard is still 1 wife. So the standard back then was also 1 wife, and a concubine was looked down upon because adultery is strictly forbidden. So a concubine is 1 step above adultery because it's still someone who lives with you, is probably one of your servants, but doesn't have the station of a wife in your house.
Okay.
So it's really muddy waters. It goes back and forth a lot. But at the end of the day, like the tradition for the last 800 years has been monogamous and no affairs allowed at all. And in masturbation also forbidden.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think like just the greater culture is there's power in sex. I mean, there is spiritual power in it, whether you take that in a metaphysical sense or you take that in the sense of your mental health. But we see it that people who engage in a lot of premarital sex, it has a toll on them. There are people that I see it personally that are unable to have meaningful relationships. You know, they sort of lose that ability. They put off developing that skill for several years, and then, you know, 30 is creeping up on them. Women are suddenly gaining this realization that, oh wait, shit, I only have a couple more years to start a family. Guys aren't used to sticking around, and there is a cultural drag on that. You know, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not taking a hardline traditionalist stance like never have premarital sex, but what I am thinking is that personally my preference would be limited to people that you actually have an emotional involvement with. Because like we've all been in that position where we were a young teenage boy, or dick is starting to work and it's working overtime, and we really want to fuck a girl and she's not putting out because she has it in her that, well, you know, I got to save myself for that first special time. And that's a natural inclination in them. You know, it's not even something that's learned, because we're getting into a point where women are encouraged to lose their virginity early and have lots of sex because, oh, we can all be like guys. And, you know, I'd wager that, well, guys also should be making an effort to keep it in their pants until there's someone that they can grow with. And even if they don't stick with them for life, they got important lessons out of this, both romantically and sexually. But, you know, guys have this natural inclination of, I want to put my dick in anything. You know, it just started working. I'd fuck a sponge, which some guys do.
An apple pie.
Homemade fleshlights. Look it up if you're 12 years old or if you are 30 and not getting laid. You gotta put like a rubber glove, some plastic, some Vaseline, warm it up. I've never tried that.
Fucking Jay just cured the incel murder rate.
Fuck a sponge. Fuck a sponge with like a latex glove on it. But I mean, it's really hard to ignore the cultural, you know, the damage that's going on en masse with people. Because I've seen both my sisters are in their 30s. One of them only got married in the last 2 years, and the other one still isn't married. And she was, you know, there's a little TMI on the family info, but I don't mind divulging it. She was engaged at one point in her mid-20s. And she was married at one point in her early 20s as well. She was very religious at one point. That didn't work out well for her. So I'm not saying that get married as soon as you can, you know, get married right out of high school. I don't think that's the go-to either, at least in the culture that we're in right now, where people do get to enjoy their youth more. They get to enjoy their childhood more. We take a little bit longer to mentally grow up. I'm not saying get married right out of high school. That's a very bad decision. People are still developing. It's usually not going to end well for you. Especially when we're in a culture where divorce is acceptable, which I'm not going to comment on that because, you know, some couples should try to work out their problems and some should get divorced. So that I don't have too much of a stance on. But like if you're 20 and you want to get married, I suggest maybe just stay in the dating phase for a little longer. Give it a couple more years and see how that's going to play out for you. If you're still together in a couple of years, fuck it, get married. If you're not, then at least you didn't pay for a wedding and lawyers.
Right.
But like, just try to limit yourself. You know, we are surrounded by temptation constantly, and we're seeing the result. You know, it's not just sexual temptation. We're seeing the result of the temptation of being online. And this is coming from someone who's extremely online, like someone who partakes in dating apps. They're not good for me. Like, they have really fucked my ability to flirt in real life until I've been talking to someone for a couple of weeks, and that makes it really hard to take the first step, approach someone, flirt, and get their number. It's really ruined my ability to do that because it's just so convenient, even if I don't get a lot of matches in a week, to just sit there for a couple of minutes, swipe through an app, and see this full array of, you know, women in front of me. It's very easy. It fucks with your dopamine receptors. Scrolling through Twitter, scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through Facebook all day, that really fucks with your dopamine receptors. To just sit around and not build healthy habits. Like, people, and we see with obesity rates, they eat a lot, they don't work out, they don't move a lot. We work under artificial lights in corporate offices all day. And so we see the result of partaking in all this temptation around us, and people are not happy. I mean, it's clear that people aren't happy. People aren't satisfied, and they try to fill it with the material goods around them. You know, they try to Netflix binge on the weekends, get drunk, go party. And I think it's part of something larger. Like, this is a very weird tangent I'm about to go down, but it's something that I've thought about a lot. And that is something that someone I don't listen to, but I heard him on Pete Open My Eyes to it, and that's Hotep Jesus.
Yeah.
And architecture. Architecture really does play a whole lot into where we are at culturally at the time. So we see, you know, with old cathedrals versus new churches. Well, with old cathedrals, we were building places that we believed God would inhabit. So we made them extravagant. We took all of our limited resources at the time and put them into this thing that we thought the Spirit of God was going to inhabit. And that resonated with people when you walked in. Because you can see with old churches, old synagogues, old mosques, like, you walk in and you see this level of detail, this intricacy, the expensive materials that went into it. And you feel something in there, even if you're not religious and you're not feeling a connection with God. Like, you feel a sense of awe when you walk in, because you walked into somewhere that someone put a lot of effort into this, a lot of time was spent to create this feeling. Versus now, you pass by these new churches, the eternal love of God, Jesus Christ, eternal love, Christ, God, love, and blah, 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 Episcopalian church.
It looks like a stiff fucking wind could knock it over.
Yeah. And like, someone could turn it into a strip club in 10 years.
Right.
Where they have a free seafood lunch every Friday. If you're getting lunch at the strip club, like, don't lie to people. You're not there for the lunch. You don't want to eat that. God knows what's floating around in that air. Don't eat that shit. Just look at the stripper that's not going to fuck you. Give her your single dollars and have that stripper booty juice money going through the economy. Okay. And we see it with architecture. I mean, you see it in the decline of American architecture. And it's so easy to see that somewhere around like the middle of the last century, there was this decline. Art Deco was like the last expression of real architecture, because I don't like New York, but the one thing I like about it is those old Art Deco buildings that they said something. There's a spirit to them. They're nice to look at.
Yeah.
Versus now, where you're surrounded just by these giant, soulless concrete and glass structures that don't age well, and they don't inspire anything except, in my case, dread. Like, the last time I was in New York City was February, and I was anxious the entire time I was there, because it was like, I don't feel a connection to my soul in here. I just feel like empty. This is a weird experience. I don't like this. But for most people, it just inspires emptiness. And that's what the people that built it want. Because what are these buildings? They're office buildings. They're not apartments. I mean, the apartments are also just these giant, soulless concrete structures. But that goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to shun everything that builds you as a person. Fuck eating healthy. Fuck abstaining from, vices. And I'm not saying never do that. I'm currently smoking a pipe. The last time I recorded with you, I drank half a bottle of scotch.
Right.
But I don't do it daily. Well, tobacco, yeah, I do, but that's a little different. But like the drinking, I don't drink daily. I don't partake in these things daily. I try to maintain a habit of exercising because the first time I built that was when I was in a really bad mental state. So I started exercising because I had nothing else to do. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do something healthy. And it helped. But we're not supposed to partake in that. We are supposed to go from our big soulless concrete building, our little, 400 square foot shoebox apartment in the sky under fluorescent lighting with no yard, no nature around us. We're supposed to go from there into our soulless little car, because also cars have become incredibly soulless over the last 40 years. They say nothing, they do nothing, but they're full of all the technology we want and need. You can have an iPad in your fucking car to play the corporate music that has been sold to you. And it's coming from someone who likes corporate music just from 40, 50 years ago. But we're all victims of this culture. You go into your soulless apartment, into your soulless car, to your soulless, meaningless work, where there's never a sense of completion. You're always doing the same thing day in and day out under this artificial light in your little cubicle. You eat unhealthy because you don't have the time to prepare your food. You have no one at home who prepares it for you because you're prolonging your personal relationships. And, women are in a workplace, so you don't have someone at home who is homemaking and taking care of everything and making meals for you. You've never learned how to make your own meals because your family just got you Pizza Hut and McDonald's as a kid. And so you go there, you overeat because we don't have a sense of portion control. Our guts are bigger. We're just sitting around all day. We're bored. We eat out of boredom. We're like caged animals. And then once we're done under that fluorescent lighting, we go home, back to our soulless apartment to engage in the latest streaming service because now there's fucking 20 of them. We sit around like potatoes because we are mentally drained from doing nothing all day to just go home and do nothing all day on our couch. We don't exercise. We don't go outside. And then on the weekends, we counteract that by going out to a club in another soulless building, drinking our brains out, putting a fun powder up our noses, and banging some random slut. And then towards our late 20s, we panic and we go, well, shit, I need to get married like my parents did. But we have no sense of how to get married like our parents did. And our parents didn't even have a sense to get married like their parents did because they were the progenitors of this devolving culture. And we repeat this. And we repeat this day in and day out. And I mean, that's how you get to a point where the lockdowns are able to happen because nothing changed. All we're doing is taking out the super soulless element of working under those fluorescent lights and being able to procrastinate at home doing our work. Because in reality, we have a lot more time to, be watching Netflix. We can be on Zoom with it on mute and we can do whatever we want on the side. I've done it with a class I had last semester where our teacher was lecturing. It was a Zoom lecture and I was just playing video games the whole time because it was easy to do. I have my laptop here. I have my desktop here. She doesn't see it. I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm on mute the whole time. That's how we get to this point in our culture where this thing is happening because there had to be a concerted effort from all the powers that be on top, not just the government, but the corporate powers that helped create the schooling system we have just to create corporate drones because you don't have a skill. You don't have any skills. You wasted your entire teenage years in your young 20s being indoctrinated to work for a corporation. So we have this entire soulless element. We don't see the personal lives we're living as soulless. We see the corporate jobs we have as soulless, and rightfully so. They very much are. I'd never want to work under a corporation. That's why I said at the beginning that I'm very happy that I'm working in my family business.
Right.
Because I have control over myself. Even though I'm the son working here, I get a lot of agency because I displayed a level of maturity to decide that instead of going into debt for a master's degree, I'm going to work here and help grow this business.
Yeah.
So I get agency, I get independence, and I get treated like a business partner rather than employee.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have this personal connection with them because they are my parents. So I get to work with them. I get to work with my sister, who's an architect who lives in New York City, sadly. I get to work with her. I get to be in contact with her because she gets to do the renderings for us when a client needs it. So like there's this level of familiarity.
Well, you also have a connection to the business that
exactly
most people don't have when they're going into a career, right? And so you see people like me, for instance, who just left a job that I'd worked for 5 years in my 40s to go into another job, still driving truck, but I have no connection to the previous job, right? I have a much higher connection to the job I'm currently in because it's the same company my dad's worked for the last 30 years. So the owners of the company know my family. They know who I am. They know my father. They know my mom. And so there's more of a sense of community involved in what I'm doing than there ever was where I was at. And
I'm sure it's far more fulfilling.
Yeah, it's much easier for me to do on a day in and day out basis with a good attitude and to feel good about myself, right? Because I feel like I'm participating in something that is at least familiar to my family, right? There's some organic, like lower level or higher level, however you want to look at it. There's this undergirding like connection to where I'm at that I never had at any other company I was at before.
Yeah, and no, and that's completely on point because it's like a hierarchy that when you just work for somebody else, you don't feel a connection and you dread waking up every morning and you dread having to do what you do and you don't want to do it. And every day you're either counting until you change your job or till you retire. You're counting down for that. And then you have the level of the entrepreneur that even if they don't like what they do, they have a drive to do it every morning because that is their livelihood. That is their sustenance. So they have to do it. Otherwise, they're not going to eat. And then when you're, in a business that your family started and that you're working in and they're still working in, and it's still very much small on a family level. It's 3 employees and our crew. It's my parents and me. And so when I wake up in the morning, I have to work because it's not just my livelihood and my future, but it's also the current reality of my family. That if I don't bring in enough clients for us, that we're going to have to tighten our belts. So this is all of our success hinging on this. So there's so much more that goes into play. And it really is a community aspect because what's a healthy, thriving community? One that cares about each other. That's not just what can you get, it's what can you contribute so that everyone in your community is doing well. And that's the importance of communities. And that's another thing in our culture that we don't have. Right. Everything that was community oriented has been stripped down. I mean, how many Boy Scouts are there now versus 50 years ago?
Yeah.
How many people have a connection to local religious institutions? How many people are participating in anything community oriented? Not really. So it's this another thing that has, and I think it's not just dying off. I think it has been killed off deliberately in order to create the society we have now. I mean, at the end of the day, even someone who is more libertine than I am can look at the society we are at right now and then tell me, I want them to tell me how they would build a society. And it is very unlikely that they would create the culture we have right now.
Right. Absolutely. Well, hey, man, it's been over an hour, and I think that's a great place to stop because we killed sexual culture in this fucking podcast, which I didn't expect, but that was awesome. I had a blast.
Yeah, had a lot of thoughts. Oh, it was a great one, man. It was absolutely great.
All
Thank you for having me.
Well, plug away. Plug everything.
Yeah, you can find me
except for your shitty podcast that you don't fucking produce.
Yeah, no, yeah, just yeah.
I'm just playing with you.
Don't find that on the podcast. It is actually shit. I don't think I'll publish an episode a month on there. I do have something I'm working on because one of my co-hosts right now is currently at Mises U. Another one is too busy working and can't record till April. So it's not the first time this happened to me, but I am going to have to man that for myself for a couple of weeks. I got something in the works for that. So that's Cognitive Dissidence. Find me on Slurpgang. Find me on Twitter, peaceful_slave. It is not a BDSM reference, just peaceful slavery was taken, which was my brand on Instagram. So no, it's not a BDSM reference for those wondering. My BDSM test results, I am a dominant, so I am never a woman's slave. No woman is above me. And I got nothing else besides that because I work and do not have time for anything else. So,
all right.
yeah. Again, thank you for having me, man. It has been an absolute pleasure.
It was a blast, dude. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm glad we actually made it happen. And fucking, I'm glad we winged it. I'm glad we didn't come into it with an idea.
Natural born improviser right here.
All right, bro. I'm gonna stop the recording.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. Pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedom. Don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times that I've taken our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. They all gather in the rallies and they chant their names on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedom. Don't feed them cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the times that are taken